that montage you just saw, it was 5 o'clock this evening that I called Ransford, the graphic designer. I said, put a montage together. Then he called me back and said, boss, what photograph should I said, well, just take the heads of states, that kind of thing. Look at what he's done. It's short, but it's brilliant. That's what I like about young people who can create, who can do something good. The guy is just great. 5 p.m. I said, Ransford, we have to do something else. This Ghana man we want to do, can you create a little bit of a montage? He's dexterous like that. Have a look at the montage again. Ransford, congrats, that's a good job. And tonight, we're beginning a series of political history of Ghana man. Tonight also, we are relying on Dr. Obed Asamoah's book, and it's a story that occurred in 1995. Those of you who don't know about it, pay attention. It actually did happen in Ghana. This was the event of a fight, a brawl, a confrontation, a boxing match in cabinet between the president of the country and the vice president of the country. See how Dr. Obed Asamoah captures that momentous moment, and a few other things related. That's the first part. Thursday will bring you another part. Next week, Tuesday, will bring you another part. We'll be doing that until the end of Ghana Man. Those of you who have seen our social media video about amendments of constitution and all of that, we'll put it together again for TV itself, maybe on Thursday. And then we have other aspects of Ghana's history for you as we run down towards the end of the month, which will be 29th March, which is the birthday of President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. My birthday comes earlier than that, isn't it? So we have a lot to celebrate in March. Okay, let's get to the details. So he says, a crisis developed within the Progressive Alliance over Vice President Arkaah, who was representing the NCP. Now, I need to explain to you what happened in those days. So, in the 1992 elections, the National Democratic Congress, which you know today, went into an alliance with some political parties. The concern was that at the beginning of the Constitution, the Nkrumah's tradition is one big block in the history of Ghana since independence, and the Dankwa Buzia, they call them the UP tradition, is another big block. The members of the PNDC were concerned about what to do, that with the return of constitutional rule, should they become an Nkrumah's party that is fit into the Nkrumah's bracket, like an amoeba, or should they then be part of the United Party? Being part of the United Party was more complicated for them because their opposition, the raging opposition throughout the 80s, had been formed on the platform of the United Party, led by Professor Albert Edubwah, including Nana Akufo-Addo, J. Kufuor, Safwid, all of them. The UP group had been very opposed to the PNDC. You have to remember that it's interesting because the PNDC had overthrown the Nkrumah's government. That's very interesting, isn't it? So the party that won the 1979 election was an Nkrumah's party. The party that lost the election was the United Party, the Dankwa Buzia people. They lost that election. But when the coup came to overthrow the government of the Nkrumah's group, it was the Dankwa Buzia people who were more opposed to the coup even than the Nkrumahs. That's a very interesting irony. The Nkrumahs who were overthrown from power did not themselves fight the revolution. They did, but just in small patches. Kweku Bakun, Kwesi Pratt, and others formed some movements and then were opposed to the coup. But by and large, majority of the members of the Nkrumah's group sort of joined the coup, something like that. So the opposition to the PNDC government had been from the UP tradition. It was therefore difficult for the PNDC, in metamorphosing themselves into a political party for the 1992 elections, to go to the UP. So they wanted to be the Nkrumahs. However, word is that Flight Lieutenant Rawlings, the leader of the party himself, was not particularly excited about the Nkrumahs, and he himself was a kind of UP type person. Of course, he married a big UP man's daughter, which is Nana Akufo-Addo Rawlings. Her father was a very important member of the UP back in the day. So it was suspected that Rawlings himself had some sentiments towards the UP more than the Nkrumahism people. So, well, the PNDC decided that let's go as a new force, NDC, but let's sort of align more with the socialist thinking. To do that, they got the smaller Nkrumah parties to come into an alliance. That alliance they called the was it progressive? They called it the Progressive Alliance. They called it the Progressive Alliance. So one Nkrumah's person, Mr. Kensim Arkaah, who had been a famous public servant and politician of the past, was selected as the NCP, that's how they call the party, the NCP leader, and he became the running mate to J.J. Rawlings, and then they won the election of 1992. And so from that time on, this is the story that continues so that you can understand it. So here's the continuation of the story. A crisis developed within the Progressive Alliance over the Vice President Arkaah, who was representing the NCP, an alliance partner. About the third week of August 1994, Allegations of impropriety by him with a lady named Jemima Yali were being made in the Free Press newspaper. Arkaah tried to kill the story by going to see the editor of the paper in an alleged attempt to corrupt him. Now, that's a photograph of Kume Arkaah that I put on so that you can see it. Kume Arkaah, that's a photograph. We'll show you a video of him speaking at the Independence Square in a minute. But let's go on with the story. His encounter with the editor was secretly recorded and reported in the newspaper, making matters worse. This episode was to intensify the Cold War between President Rawlings and his vice president. Arkaah alleged that the President Rawlings sent a delegation of elders led by Nathan Kwao of the president's office to ask him to resign, which for me is Obed Asamoah, the writer, which for me was appropriate if it was true. Let's go on. But Nathan Kwao denied it. According to him, a delegation including Atakesin, chairman of the NCP, Isifu Ali, chairman of the NDC, John Tetega, leading member of the NCP, and Kwanson, member of the National Security Council, only met with him, Arkaah, to hear his version of events. The Third Alliance Party, the Eagle Party, a change of name because Eagle was part of the National Coat of Arms, etc. Eagle called upon Arkaah to resign, which, if he had any sense, he should have done on his own. Okay, so this is Isifu Ali, who was a former member of the UP, who, according to the story, Rawlings sent him to go and tell Arkaah to resign. This is Mr. Kwanson, who was with the BNI, the Bureau of National Investigation, as it then was known, a policeman, very seasoned policeman who became a member of the National Security, and they went in to go and talk to. We don't have the photograph of Nathan Kwao, but those of you who know him remember him, very tall man. Instead, he, Arkaah, went to act in a way that undermined the collective responsibility of the government. In a May Day speech to workers in 1995, he called for the withdrawal of proposals put before Parliament by the government for the introduction of the value-added tax of 17.5%, which aroused great public alarm and opposition. He, Arkaah, was now playing to the gallery, provoking accusations of treachery by some members of the cabinet, since he was the very person who presided over the cabinet that decided on the VAT and was indeed the chairman of the government's economic management team. Now, Dr. Obed Asamoah is recounting the story where, because of the difficulties of the president and the vice president, in leading the May Day speech at Independence Square, called for the withdrawal of the proposal of a new tax which the government was presenting, the value-added tax. Obed Asamoah finds it incongruous that as the vice president who led the economic management team and who was in cabinet to put the proposal together is the one telling the workers that we don't want the tax. That was a very difficult time for whichever government. You can understand, your vice president goes to tell workers that we should withdraw the VAT. You put out a VAT, workers are agitating against it, and then on May Day, vice president says we don't want the VAT anymore. That was very difficult. Let's move on and see what happened next. The VAT proposal was adopted by Parliament, provoking a high incidence of price escalation and opposition demonstrations, orchestrated by an opposition pressure group called the Alliance for Change. Since the opposition was not then in Parliament, it acted through mob agitation on the street. Now, you need to understand that opposition was not in Parliament because the New Patriotic Party, upon allegations that the 1992 elections had been rigged by Flight Lieutenant Rawlings and the NDC, boycotted the parliamentary elections. Now, they were able to do that because in the 1992 election, the parliamentary election and the presidential election were held on separate days. The presidential election was held in November and the parliamentary election was due in December. So after the presidential election, the opposition decided that they were not interested in the parliamentary election because Rawlings had rigged the presidential election, and they put up a book entitled The Stolen Verdict. So that's what Obed Asamoah is referring to. Let's go on. In a massive demonstration in Accra, dubbed Kume Preko, Kill Me Instantly, there were clashes with the cadres of the NDC, which left 5 people dead and 10 arrested. I remember that when I was informed of a possible counter-demonstration by the cadres, I advised against it, fearing that it would result in violence, as indeed it did. I advised that the demonstrators be allowed free passage, and thereafter we will organize a much bigger demonstration to deflate the opposition strategy of making the government seem unpopular. My advice was ignored. In the light of the opposition demonstrations, the government suspended the VAT indefinitely on 6th of June 1995. Now, the writer, remember, is a man who, at the time the story occurred, was holding 2 important positions. No one the history of Ghana, has held those two important positions. The photograph is there. Dr. Obed Asamoah was the Attorney General and Minister for Justice. And guess what? He was also Minister for Foreign Affairs. That's interesting. One man. He was Minister for Justice and Attorney General. He was also Minister for Foreign Affairs. So imagine today, Shirley Ayokor-Botchwey is Minister for Foreign Affairs, and then she's also the Attorney General. Or, in the reverse, Godfrey Dame is Attorney General, and he's also Minister for Foreign Affairs. That's how big Obed Asamoah was. That's how important he was to Rawlings. Attorney General and Minister for Foreign Affairs. Okay, so let's move on with the story. And so when he says, I advise against demonstrations, I advise that the demonstrators be allowed a free passage. You can understand where he's coming from. He's advising as the government lawyer, the Attorney General, let the demonstrators go. When they are done, we'll do a bigger demonstration. He says that his advice was ignored. And then eventually after the demonstrations, on the 6th of June, 1995, the bill was withdrawn. The deaths at the Kume Preko demonstration provided the opposition with an opportunity to exploit. The leaders of the Alliance for Change, Nana Akufo-Addo, Kwesi Pratt, Akoto Ampao, Dr. Nyahota Maklo, and Dr. Charles Reku Broby called for a probe into the death and the destruction of property. So here are the leaders of the demonstration: Nana Akufo-Addo, Akoto Ampao, Nyahota Maklo. Oh, I missed something? And Charles Reku Broby. Okay, let's move on with the story. Oh, my touch screen is going off, isn't it? They're going to restore it. They're going to restore it in a minute, and then we'll get there. Sorry about that, viewers. These days, the touchscreen gives us some difficulty, but they're going to restore it, and then we'll hear the rest of the story. Okay, great. It's been restored. All right, so let's move on. The ACDR, the NGO of the cadres, stated that their members were present at the Central Business District purely to protect the 31st December market from arson. So the story that you need to understand is that the clashes in the demonstration occurred because a group calling itself the ACDR, alleged to be working under the auspices of the mayor of Accra, the Honorable E.T. Mensah, also staged a counter-demonstration at the same time the Kume Preko people were demonstrating. The clashes led to 5 people dying because gunshots were exchanged between, it looks like, the demonstrators and the ACDR. It was a very bad day in the history of Ghanaian politics. It was a massive, massive demonstration. There was no private radio at the time, by the way. Okay, so that's the story. The ACDR, the NGO of the cadres, stated that their members were present at the Central Market. They were explaining why they were there. They said they were there to protect the 31st December market from arsonists. The VAT matter had disrupted business at the Ministry of Finance and Statistical Service, whose closure was ordered by the then Finance Minister, Dr. Kwesi Botchwey, in the face of constant disruptions and demonstrations by civil servants and threats to staff and officials of the ministry. That's Dr. Kwesi Botchwey in your shot. If we have time today, we'll be hearing him out on the e-levy dashboard because he's given an important speech during the celebration of Ghana's independence earlier this week. Okay, speaking to NDC supporters as the leader of the outreach team to the Volta region, I cautioned against attacks on the NCP. So Dr. Asamoah is bringing the story back to the Arkaah and Rawlings fracas. So we started with the Progressive Alliance, and then he talked about how Arkaah waded into the VAT, and so it became a problem. Now he's coming back into how they handled that difficulty between Rawlings and Arkaah. Interesting. He says, he, Obed Asamoah, speaking to supporters as the leader of the outreach team to the Volta region, cautioned against attacks on the NCP. But I said, quoting him, that it was legitimate for Arkaah to see himself as out of office for openly challenging government policies. He was openly challenging government policies that he was party to. This was an attempt to salvage what we could of the NCP support. So they were concerned. Members of the NDC, including Obed Asamoah, were concerned that this Arkaah and Rawlings fight is going to take the NCP, the Nkrumah's group, away. Today, it doesn't sound plausible because NDC is so big, MPP is so big, but it didn't start like that. NDC were worried that a small party, if they leave us, we cannot win the election. That's how the politics used to be. Those of you who are hearing it for the first time, you don't know how to see it because you can't see how NDC today will go into alliance with it. Which small party? There's no small party anywhere. But that time, it was a big matter. It was a big matter for the cabinet that we are losing NCP. If Arkaah is not treated well, we're going to be in trouble. So by that time, one met supporters and said, please stop talking against the NCP. Let's see what happened thereafter. Okay. He says that was an attempt to salvage what we could of the NCP support. Arkaah continued his rebellion by signing a memorandum of understanding in October with the University Teachers Association of Ghana, UTAG, which had been on strike for better service conditions. accepting all their proposals without regard to the impact on the economy and the effect it would have in gingering other worker organizations to follow the example of UTAG. This one I'm sure we can relate to because we are relaying this story 25 years later at the same time that the same UTAG is on strike again against the government of Ghana. So this we can relate to. So that's easy. So UTAG was on strike then as they are on strike now. And you can imagine the vice president signs a memorandum accepting everything that UTAG is saying. So cast your mind to it. So imagine Dr. Muhammadu Bawumia calls UTAG and says, we know that UTAG are agitating for certain things. Says, UTAG, everything you want to agitate, I agree. Come, let's sign. We signs it. And he signs it as a rebellion because he's having a bad relationship with the president and the cabinet. Can you imagine? This is what happened. The vice president signed it. He said, he called them, let's look at it again. He said, Arkaah continued his rebellion by signing a memorandum of understanding in October with the University Teachers Association of Ghana, UTAG, which had been on strike for better service conditions. He accepted all their proposals without regard to the impact on the economy and the effect it would have in gingering other worker organizations to follow the example. Okay, let's move on. Several ministers were outraged. Of course they would be. This was during the absence from Ghana of the president, who was attending the Commonwealth Summit in Auckland, New Zealand. Story gets better, doesn't it? So imagine, UTAG are on strike. Nana Akufo-Addo is not in town, is he? He's in Dubai, participating in the Dubai fair. Whilst he's there, imagine tomorrow morning, Dr. Muhammadu Bawumia calls a meeting of UTAG. Come to my office. Okay, so UTAG, what do you want? They say, we want a salary of 15,000 a month. He said, yeah, sign, we'll do it. He said, we want book allowance of 4,000. Yeah, we'll do it. He signs. He said, we want cars for each UTAG member. Yeah, we'll do it. That's what happened. So that's why he said cabinet ministers were outraged. Why is the vice president doing that? Why was the vice president doing that? He was doing that because he was angry with the president. Let's see how the story continues. Okay, several ministers, he says, were outraged. This was during the absence of Ghana by the president. He was in the Commonwealth Summit in New Zealand. Okay, now this is the big one. President and vice president in physical confrontation at the castle in 1995. So once you get the background to the story, you will now see the build-up to the main heavyweight bout in the cabinet. This is the build-up. So you understand it. President comes back from New Zealand. They say, Charlie, your vice president is really messing up. But what has he done again? He met UTAG and he agreed on everything. Those of you who've heard Rawlings, you can imagine. Rawlings will say, what? Why did he do that? And he says, finance minister will say, I wasn't there. He's the one who did it. He met them. He says, he's acting president and he signed. He says, trade minister, what? Education minister, what happened? He said, well, it's the vice president. So this is the background before the cabinet meeting. Let's see what happens. Okay. Finally, things came to a head when President Rawlings confronted Arkaah at a cabinet meeting on 28th of December 1995, resulting in a brawl between the two. As usual, before President Rawlings arrived at the meeting, Arkaah was taking copious notes without contributing to the discussion. So Rawlings came to the cabinet meeting late. And we heard that Rawlings attended all his cabinet meetings late. Well, we don't know whether it's true or not, but we heard. So this was one such example. Rawlings attended the meeting late. Obed Asamoah says that when the meeting was going on, Arkaah kept writing. You don't know what he's writing. He's not contributing. He's just writing. Then Rawlings comes in. Okay, let's see what happens after that. Okay, so that's a photograph of Flight Lieutenant Rawlings. Look at how he looks outraged. I'm sure that's how he looked on that day. Let's move on. It says, Obed Asamoah says, you wonder why he did that, why Arkaah was writing, and whether he needed the notes for mischief. Okay, all of a sudden, President Rawlings and his vice were in a scuffle, and they both fell from the seat onto the floor. So Rawlings came in, the president sits by the vice president, so he came in, he sat down, and he's come from Commonwealth. Arkaah has done all the things, he's done May Day, he's met UTAG. So Rawlings sits down, is very angry. Okay, 1995, Rawlings was still very young and strong. So the vice president sitting by him, he looks at him, he probably slaps him. Vice president, he also pushes him. And Rawlings said, I'll teach you a lesson. He pulls him onto the ground, the butu starts, They're all on the floor. President, vice president. This is part of Ghana's political history. We are learning it today. But I've given you the background so you can understand. It's not that Rawlings is bad or he's good. Put yourself in the position you might probably do worse. But this is what happens. So Rawlings comes in, he sits down. The guy is sitting by him, writing. You don't know what he's going to. He just slaps him off the table. And the guy is an old man. Arkaah at that time was heading for 70 probably. Rawlings was 40-something. And but Arkaah must have done well. To get JJ onto the floor, Rawlings is 6'7" or something like that. To get him onto the floor with, Arkaah is short, I'm taller than Arkaah. So you can imagine, Rawlings is very high up there. But both of them are sitting down and, they hold each other. They throw themselves on the floor, More drama. Hold it. He says, okay. Rawlings and his vice president were in a scuffle, and they both fell from their seats onto the floor. Let's move on. The shock momentarily froze everyone. Did you hear that? The shock. It momentarily froze everyone. Because you are a minister sitting in the cabinet. So in this cabinet, 1995, let's get a roll call. PV Obey, Kwesi Boche, Ibrahim Adam, Adom-Otchere, Totobi Kwachi, Joyce Ayi, all of them are there. And then suddenly, president is punching, vice president is punching him back. So Obed Asamoah says everybody froze. Okay, let's hear what happens. The shock momentarily froze everyone. And we remained glued to our seats for a while before some ministers went in to separate them after recovering from the shock. That's a very dramatic story, isn't it? So they are all on the floor, they are all falling down on the floor, and then suddenly some people go in, and then they push them, and they recover from the shock. Okay, let's move on. When the event hit the news, now this is the interesting part. When the event hit the news, several ministers were outdoing each other in denying that there was a physical confrontation. I, Obed Asamoah, kept quiet, as I am not in the habit of denying the truth. That's very interesting. Obed Asamoah is foreign minister, and Obed Asamoah is foreign minister at the same time Attorney General. The only person sitting in the cabinet holding 2 cabinet portfolios. He says that after the event, ministers were falling over themselves, denying that something had happened. But he didn't say anything because he doesn't like to speak lies because the thing happened. So he was just quiet. Okay, let's see what happened. I kept quiet as I am not in the habit of denying the truth. Acknowledging it also in these circumstances will not have been the best for the image of the government and the country. So Obed Asamoah kept quiet. The government issued a statement to the effect that the president had confronted Arkaah over his statement at an NCP conference, that cabinet had become a forum for corruption and unscrupulous plans. It also referred to other public statements by Arkaah which undermined the integrity of the cabinet. The statement further said that the president took Arkaah's arm to make him leave, but Arkaah shrugged it off. He was later persuaded to leave. Cabinet felt that until Arkaah respected the principle of collective responsibility, cabinet could not work with him. Okay, that sounds like an interesting statement. But Kojo Yankah, the information minister who issued the statement, was lucky. And why do I say he was lucky? Because it's not today. At that time, there was no private radio, just GBC. If this was happening today, social media, Twitter, it would have been terrible. Videos would have been made, they would be on the floor, they would be punching each other. It would have been bizarre. But it was easier for them. They just issued a statement and said, Rawlings merely took Arkaah's arm like they were going to have a wedding and says, oh, chief, please leave the room. And then Arkaah shrugged his hand off. Is that how people fall on the ground? But anyway, that was the statement that was issued. And I'm saying that that's the difference between the media context. The media context today, the media context of yesterday would have made this story look completely different. And that's why we have to appreciate the times that we live in, or we have to denigrate the times we live in. It's up to you how you look at it. We haven't finished the story. Okay. All right, so my screen is gone off again. But as they fix it, let's see Arkaah and Rawlings together in a video at the Independence Square at the beginning of their marriage of president and vice president. Here it is.
Lieutenant J.J. Rawlings is ready there, holding the sword.
Do in the name of the Almighty God swear.
Do in the name of the Almighty God swear.
That I will bear true faith.
That I will bear true faith.
And allegiance.
And allegiance.
To the Republic of Ghana.
To the Republic of Ghana.
And I dedicate myself.
And I dedicate myself
to the service.
To the service.
And well-being.
And well-being.
Of the people of the Republic of Ghana.
Of the people of the Republic of Ghana.
And to do right.
And to do right.
To all manner of persons.
To all manner of persons.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Okay, so that was JJ and Con Kenson Arkaah. So you saw that the day they took their oath, the beautiful day of their marriage. Okay, so the story goes on. Following the confrontation, by a letter dated 15 January 1996, the Council of State advised Arkaah to resign as vice president in the light of the abrogation of the alliance by the NCP, but he will not budge. Okay. Thereafter, the NCP merged with the PCP, and Arkaah was elected the flag bearer of the PCP, which went into another alliance with the NPP on 16th August 1996. On entering into the alliance with the NPP, Arkaah became the running mate of J.A. Kufuor, the presidential candidate of the NPP. So that's how the story really ended. Very, very fascinating story in the history of Ghana's politics, told to you in Ghana Month here on Good Evening Ghana. Arkaah then eventually decided that he will retain his presidential candidate position for his party. His party went into an alliance with the PCP, which was actually the party of Alhaji Asuma Banda and the other CPP people. That party went into a great alliance with the NPP. NPP felt in 1996 that they cannot win the election by themselves. They needed to align with a smaller party. That will not happen today. They did with the PCP, and Arkaah, sitting as vice president, became the running mate of Kufuor. Next time we'll get to the details of that story. There's also another part, so that's J.A. Kufuor, beautifully represented here. There's another part, okay. So it says that throughout the 1996 campaign, this is just a continuation, Arkaah refused to resign as a vice president, even though he campaigned vigorously against President Rawlings and the NDC. I remember him mounting a platform to claim that President Rawlings was not a Ghanaian. He had, however, said the opposite in the 1992 campaign when he was the running mate to President Rawlings. The TV coverage of both events was the subject of a campaign advert by Dan Markin, the leader of the DPP, that effectively ridiculed Arkaah and exposed him as a liar. Okay, so that's the end of that story of Arkaah. That's the end of the story of Arkaah. One more bit. So Obed Asamoah decided that, and he talks about it. I'm going to show you that because Arkaah is gone and the NCP are wobbling in the alliance, he needed to go in there and talk to other smaller parties so that they will support the NDC, because they were all concerned that if they lose the support of the smaller parties, the NPP might win the 1996 election. So here is what he did. Have a listen. He says, one other thing that I did to give the NDC advantage over the opposition was to court the PNC of Dr. Hila Liman, who declared after the NCP-PNC alliance that he will not be part of an alliance of the opposition parties. In my calculation, keeping the opposition divided weakened their chances of taking power from us. Okay, so that's Dr. Hila Liman, former president. Now, so that's the interesting bit I'm talking to you about. This is Dr. Liman. Dr. Liman it was whose government was overthrown by Fly Lieutenant Rawlings. The coup that Rawlings did in 1981 overthrew Liman's administration. But here is 1995. Dr. Liman refusing to go into alliance with the opposition and working with Dr. Obed Asamoah to the advantage of the NDC. Have a listen. This is Dr. Liman. Okay. It goes on to say that together with Baba Kamara, I met with Dr. Liman at the residence of his lieutenant, Alhaji Ramadan. Who is Alhaji Ramadan, by the way? Alhaji Ramadan is the father of the second lady, Samira Ramadan. That's her father. Anyway, so let's move on. Together with Baba Kamara, I met with Dr. Liman at the residence of his lieutenant, Alhaji Ramadan, to strike a deal whereby, with some support in the form of logistics to the PNC, they will soften their attacks on the NDC. Can you imagine that? So this Dr. Liman, whose government had been overthrown, truncated after 2.5 years in 1981. Fast forward 1995, election 1996 is approaching. Obed Asamoah goes to Dr. Liman and says, Chief, we need your support. You know, the alliance is breaking and then we need your support. And he says that they met in Ramadan's house, and by offering some logistics to the PNC, they decided to support the NDC. How did they do that? Okay, let's see it. Okay, so this is Baba Kamara. Somebody that you may not know, but he and Obed Asamoah were very, very tight, very, very close. And Baba Kamara and Obed Asamoah organized this orchestration to ensure that J.J. Rawlings was re-elected in 1996. Okay, let's move on. And this is Alhaji Ramadan, of course. I already told you, this Alhaji Ramadan is the father of many politicians, a great man. He's also Ghana's ambassador, I believe, to the UAE right now, Alhaji Ramadan. Okay, as a consequence of this meeting in Ramadan's house, during the campaign, when the NDC was under attack by the NPP for abuse of incumbency for the use by President Rawlings of the presidential jet on a campaign trip to the north, Dr. Liman countered by saying that if he were the president, he will do the same. Okay, that's interesting. That's the end of our story. So Dr. Liman helped the NDC. One of the ways in which he did manifested it, as Obed Asamoah says, is that he came up and says, NPP were saying that Rawlings is abusing incumbency. Look at him. He's using the presidential jet to go and campaign in the north. When J. Kufuor has to go to the north, he has to go by Pajero, go through Nkoko, go through Banda, go through Kintampo, and J.J. Rawlings. He's abusing incumbency. The jet that he takes there is paid by taxpayers' money. The opposition, and Kufuor and others, they were rattling these things. Obed Asamoah was quiet in the corner. He had organized himself. Liman comes and says, oh, don't listen to them. If I were president, I'll do the same. That's part of Ghana's political history. And tonight we'll end here. Okay, there's one more, Faustina Nelson's defection. We'll talk about that later because of lack of time. We're going to be building this up. Every program will have a small segment for the Ghana Man. Now that we have a beautiful montage, we'll do it all the time for you. We'll bring the history to you. But please, take some money, put it in your pocket. Don't worry about the petrol prices. Just take Trotro and go to the University of Ghana bookshop. You're a journalist, you're a young person, you need Obed Asamoah's book. It's a huge book. Go and get it and read it yourself. There's a lot in it. History is returning to our curricula. We will never do that again. Never again are we going to take history from the curricula. We are going to restore it, and it shall remain restored. Okay, so that's our history for today. Ghana Man. More history is coming on Thursday. If you don't watch anything at all, make sure you tune in and catch the history part. But it will be on social media. We'll create a file for it, and all the history that we put together, there will be a file for it on YouTube so that you can look at it, enjoy yourself, and then clap for us. Here's the montage again. A beautiful montage.